There is a quiet moment in the evening that most people don't notice. It comes without warning, and it doesn't last long. If you are still rushing, you miss it. If your mind is still loud, it passes by quietly. Tonight, I noticed it. It arrived just as I closed the door. Not a dramatic sound, just a soft click behind me. That small sound changed everything. I stood still for a moment. My hand was still on the handle. The outside world stayed on the other side. Lights, traffic, voices, movement. Inside, something shifted. I didn't move right away. I didn't turn on the lights. I stayed there, in that narrow space between the day and the night. My body was still wearing the day. My shoulders were slightly raised. My jaw was tight. I hadn't noticed. I rarely do. The room was dim. Only a faint glow from the streetlight outside slipped through the window. It was enough to see shapes, enough to feel safe. My bag slowly slid from my shoulder. It landed on the floor with a soft sound. I felt lighter instantly. I hadn't realized how much I was carrying until I wasn't. I breathed in. The air inside felt different, still, cooler, calmer. Outside air always feels busy, even when it's quiet. Inside air at night feels settled, like it has already chosen to stay. I took off my shoes slowly, not because I was tired, because I didn't want to rush anymore. The floor felt cool under my feet, grounding. I walked into the living room. My steps sounded softer here, as if the room understood what kind of evening this would be. I reached for the lamp near the sofa and turned it on. Only one lamp. The light spread gently across the room, warm, low. It didn't fill every corner. It didn't need to. Some shadows stayed. I liked that. Bright lights feel demanding. This one felt kind. I sat down on the sofa. Not heavily, not dramatically. I simply arrived. For the first time all day, nothing was asking me to be faster. I leaned back and let my head rest against the cushion. My eyes closed on their own. The silence wasn't empty. It felt full, full of space, full of permission. I breathed out slowly. My shoulders dropped a little, then a little more. I noticed how tense they had been, how tightly I had been holding myself together. The quiet does that. It loosens things you didn't know were tight. I stayed there for a while, not counting time. The room felt steady around me. So I opened my eyes and stood up again, not because I needed to do something, just because my body wanted to move. The kitchen waited quietly. Everything was exactly where I left it. I filled the kettle with water. The sound was smooth and steady. Water has a way of calming things down. I placed the kettle on the base and pressed the button. A small light turned on. While the water heated, I reached for a mug. I didn't choose the nicest one. I chose the familiar one, the one with a small crack near the handle, the one that fits my hands perfectly. I like things that stay, things that don't try too hard. The kettle clicked softly. Steam rose into the air. I poured the water slowly. The tea leaves moved gently, as if waking up from a nap. I watched them for a moment. So simple things hold attention better at night. I wrapped my hands around the mug. The warmth reached my fingers before my thoughts noticed. Back in the living room, I sat down again. This time, I sank into the sofa. The blanket was already there. I pulled it over my legs, not because I was cold, because it felt comforting. I took a small sip of tea. Too hot. I smiled slightly. I didn't mind. I looked around the room. The same room I see every day. The same furniture, the same walls. But at night, everything changes. The shadows stretch longer. The edges soften. The room feels less like a place and more like a shelter. I picked up my phone. The screen lit up immediately. Messages, notifications, news headlines. So much noise packed into a small rectangle. I didn't open anything. I turned the phone face down and placed it on the table. Tonight didn't need that version of me. I leaned back again. The tea had cooled slightly now. Perfect. I listened. Outside, a distant car passed. Somewhere, a door closed. Inside, nothing moved. My thoughts began to slow. They didn't stop. They just became quieter. Moments from the day appeared briefly. A conversation, a task, a small frustration. I didn't follow them. I let them drift by. I wasn't fixing anything tonight. This wasn't the time for solutions. This was the time for space. I breathed in, breathed out. Nothing needed my attention right now. No one needed an answer. No one needed a decision. I noticed the soft ticking of the clock. Steady, gentle. It reminded me that time was still moving, but slowly, without pressure. I shifted slightly on the sofa. The blanket moved with me. The lamp cast a warm circle of light on the wall. I watched it for a moment. There was something calming about its stillness. My body sank deeper into the cushion. The weight of the day finally began to leave me. I didn't feel lonely. I felt alone. There was a difference. Lonely feels heavy. Alone feels quiet. Tonight, quiet felt right. I closed my eyes again. Not to sleep, just to rest. The room felt like it was holding me. Nothing rushed me. Nothing pulled me away. I stayed there, in that gentle evening space, letting the night settle around me, one slow breath at a time. The morning did not arrive all at once. It unfolded slowly, almost shyly, as if the world itself was unsure whether it should wake up yet. Light crept into the room through a thin line between the curtains. It touched the edge of the floor first, then climbed the wall, then rested quietly on the corner of the desk where a cup of cold tea had been forgotten overnight. She opened her eyes before she fully woke up. There was no sudden movement, no sharp thought, just awareness. The soft weight of the blanket, the steady rhythm of her breathing, the faint sound of the city far away, muted and distant, like a memory rather than a presence. For a moment, she stayed still, not because she was tired, but because she wanted to understand how she felt. There was something different in her chest, not excitement, not sadness, something calmer, like a lake after the wind has passed, still holding the echo of waves beneath its surface. She sat up slowly, letting the morning air touch her skin. The day had not made any demands yet, and she was grateful for that. She walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside. The sky was pale, almost colorless. Buildings stood quietly, their windows reflecting light without intention. Somewhere below, a street vendor arranged items on a cart. A bicycle passed. A dog paused, then continued walking. Life was moving, but gently. She rested her forehead against the glass. There had been a time when mornings felt like pressure, a checklist waiting to be attacked, a race she never agreed to run. Back then, waking up meant remembering everything she hadn't done yet, everything she might fail at, everything that could go wrong before noon. Now, the morning felt like an invitation, not to do, but to be. She made herself a simple breakfast. Nothing special. Toast, warm water. The sound of the kettle clicking off was strangely comforting, like punctuation at the end of a sentence. She ate slowly, not scrolling, not thinking ahead, just tasting. Each bite reminded her that she was here, in this moment, alive in small, ordinary ways. After breakfast, she sat on the floor with her back against the couch. The floor was cool, solid, reliable. She closed her eyes, breathing in through her nose, breathing out through her mouth. Once, twice. She wasn't trying to empty her mind. She had learned that forcing silence only made thoughts louder. Instead, she let thoughts pass through like clouds, a memory of a conversation from last week, a worry about something unfinished, an image of a place she used to love. Each thought appeared, and then, without effort, you're drifted away. She realized something quietly important. Peace was not the absence of thoughts, it was the absence of fighting them. When she opened her eyes again, the room felt wider, not physically, emotionally. She stood up and picked up her notebook. Its pages were uneven, corners bent, filled with handwriting that changed shape depending on her mood. It was not a journal in the traditional sense, more like a collection of unfinished sentences, half-formed ideas, questions without answers. She flipped to a blank page. For a long time, she did not write. She just held the pen. There was no pressure to be wise, no need to create something meaningful. Then, without planning, she wrote, "I am allowed to move slowly." The sentence surprised her. She read it again, aloud, as if permission had ever been required. And yet, somewhere deep inside, it felt like a rule she had been waiting to hear. She wrote another line. "I don't have to arrive anywhere today." Her chest softened as she wrote it. So much of her life had been about arrival, about becoming, about reaching some imagined version of herself who would finally be enough. But this morning, enough was already here. She closed the notebook, not because she was done, but because she trusted there would be more later. She put on her shoes and stepped outside. The air was cool, carrying the faint smell of damp pavement and distant coffee. The city felt quieter than usual, as if it too was moving carefully. She walked without a destination, not fast, not slow, just present. She noticed things she usually ignored. A crack in the sidewalk shaped like a river, leaves gathered in the corner of a doorway, the reflection of clouds in a shop window. Each detail felt like a small gift. At a park, she sat on a bench. A child ran past, laughing loudly, chasing nothing in particular. An older man fed birds, his movements patient and practiced. She wondered how many lives passed each other every day without ever really seeing one another. She wondered how often she herself had been invisible to her own experience. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't check it immediately. That was new. When she finally looked, it was a message asking for something, a reminder of responsibility, a thread pulling her back toward expectation. She read it. Then she put the phone away, not in avoidance, in choice. She would respond later, when she could do so without shrinking herself. She leaned back against the bench and closed her eyes again. Sunlight warmed her face. For the first time in a long while, she felt something like trust. Not trust in plans, not trust in outcomes, trust in her ability to meet whatever came, one breath at a time. She remembered a version of herself who used to believe rest was something to earn. That stillness was laziness. That slowing down meant falling behind. She felt compassion for that version now. She hadn't known any other way. Standing up, she continued walking. The day stretched ahead of her, undefined. And for once, that felt safe. There were still things she wanted. Dreams she carried quietly. Changes she hoped for. But they no longer shouted. They waited. She stopped at a small cafe and ordered tea. Sitting by the window, she watched people pass. Everyone carrying something invisible: worry, hope, regret, anticipation. She realized something else. Gentleness was not weakness. It was strength that refused to harden. She finished her tea slowly, letting the warmth linger. When she stood to leave, she felt grounded. Not fixed, not finished, but steady. Outside, the light had shifted. The day was moving forward. And so was she, just not in a hurry. She smiled, almost without noticing, because for the first time in a long time, the direction mattered less than the way she was walking. As the evening grows quieter, something else begins to rise. Not a sound, not a thought, but a feeling. It is subtle at first, so subtle that you might miss it if you are not paying attention. A soft pressure in the chest, a small tightening behind the eyes, a sense that there is something inside you that has been waiting for silence. When the world finally slows down, the inner voice has space to speak. Not loudly, not clearly, not in full sentences. It speaks in fragments, in sensations, in half-finished thoughts that drift through the mind like mist. You sit there, doing nothing in particular, and suddenly you feel it, a quiet question forming inside you. Why am I so tired, even when I stop moving? The room has not changed. The light is still warm. The air is still calm. But inside you, something is shifting. You have slowed your body, but your mind is still running. It keeps replaying moments from the day. Things you said, things you didn't say, things you wish you had done differently. And underneath all of that, there is a deeper voice, one you don't usually hear. It says, "You don't have to rush right now." At first, you don't believe it. You have lived so long in a world that rewards speed, fast replies, fast decisions, fast improvement. Even rest has become something to optimize. But tonight, there is no one watching, no one measuring your progress, no one asking you to be better. There is only you, and the quiet. And the quiet is honest. It doesn't flatter you. It doesn't push you. It simply reveals what has already been there. A tiredness that is not just physical. A weariness that comes from carrying expectations. Expectations you didn't even choose. You begin to notice how often you tell yourself to hurry. How often you feel behind, even when there is no race. You remember moments when you felt guilty for resting, for enjoying stillness, for doing nothing. As if peace were something you had to earn. The inner voice notices this too. It asks, "Who taught you that slowing down was dangerous?" You don't have an answer, only memories, school schedules, deadlines, comparisons, quiet pressure to always improve, always grow, always move forward. And somewhere along the way, you learned that stopping meant falling behind. So even now, in this gentle evening, your mind stays alert, scanning, planning, preparing for tomorrow. The inner voice is patient. It doesn't argue, it waits. You take another slow breath, and for a brief moment, there is space between thoughts. In that space, something softer appears. A realization: you have been strong for a very long time, strong in ways no one sees. You have adapted. You have endured. You have kept going even when you were unsure. But strength, as you learned it, was always loud, always visible, always impressive. The inner voice offers a different idea. It whispers, "Gentleness can be strength too." That idea feels unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. You are used to pushing through discomfort, not sitting with it. used to fixing, not listening. So you hesitate. You wonder what would happen if you stopped trying to be strong, if you allowed yourself to be gentle instead. Would everything fall apart? Would you lose momentum? Would you become invisible? The questions linger. The room remains still. Nothing collapses. You are still here, breathing, existing, whole. The inner voice grows a little clearer now. It reminds you of moments when you felt most at peace, times when you weren't proving anything, when you weren't performing, moments that were simple, quiet, unremarkable, and yet deeply real. You begin to see a pattern. Your calm never came from achieving more. It came from releasing pressure, from letting go of the need to be impressive. The inner voice doesn't ask you to change your life. It doesn't demand bold moves or dramatic decisions. It only asks for honesty. It asks, "What are you carrying that you no longer need?" You don't answer right away. Instead, you notice your body, the shoulders, the jaw, the hands. You realize how much tension has been living there. Quietly, patiently, tension you never questioned, because it felt normal. You allow yourself to soften, just a little. The shoulders drop, the breath deepens, the hands relax. And with that small release, something else loosens too. A belief. The belief that you must always be preparing for the next thing. Tonight, there is no next thing. There is only this moment, and this moment is enough. The inner voice seems satisfied with that. It doesn't push further. It knows you are listening now. Outside, the night continues its slow arrival. Inside, you feel less divided, not fixed, not transformed, just a little more aligned. You realize that slowing down is not the same as giving up. It is not a failure. It is not weakness. It is a form of trust. Trust that you do not need to control every outcome. Trust that you can rest without disappearing. Trust that your worth does not depend on constant movement. The inner voice fades back into the background. Not gone. Just quiet again. But something has changed. You are no longer afraid of the silence. You welcome it. Because now you know, silence is not empty. It is where you finally hear yourself. The silence stays with you, not as something heavy, not as something empty, but as something steady. After listening to that inner voice, you notice a shift. Small, almost unremarkable, yet undeniable. You feel less urgency to fill the space, less pressure to explain yourself, even to yourself. The quiet has changed its meaning. It no longer feels like a pause before something important. It feels like the important thing itself. You begin to sense a different kind of strength forming, not the kind that pushes forward, but the kind that stays. You think about courage, how it is usually described. Bold actions, loud decisions, clear declarations. But what you are feeling now does not match that image. This courage is quieter, slower, harder to notice from the outside. It is the courage to remain gentle in a world that rewards hardness. The courage to move at your own pace, even when everything around you moves faster. You realize how often you have mistaken noise for confidence, speed for certainty, activity for purpose. Tonight shows you another option. You can be calm without being passive, soft without being weak, still without being stuck. This realization does not arrive dramatically. It settles in gradually, like evening light fading into night. You remember moments when you wanted to speak, but stayed silent. Not out of fear, but because silence felt truer. Moments when you chose rest over productivity. Not because you were tired, but because you were listening to yourself. At the time, those choices felt small, insignificant, and now you see them differently. They were acts of quiet courage. You see how courage does not always ask you to do more. Sometimes it asks you to stop explaining, to stop defending, to stop proving, to trust that who you are, in this moment, is already enough. This idea feels fragile. You hold it gently, afraid that it might disappear if you examine it too closely. But it stays. You notice how your breathing has changed. Slower, deeper, more natural. Your body seems to recognize this courage before your mind fully understands it. The mind still has questions. It always will. What if slowing down makes you fall behind? What if choosing gentleness costs you opportunities? What if being quiet means being forgotten? The questions appear, but they no longer control you. You let them pass, like clouds moving across a wide sky. You are beginning to understand something important. Courage does not eliminate fear. It coexists with it. Quiet courage is not about feeling ready. It is about moving gently forward, even when you are unsure. You think about tomorrow, not in detail, not as a plan, just as a continuation. You imagine carrying this calm into the day ahead, speaking a little more slowly, listening a little more deeply, reacting a little less. You imagine choosing presence over performance. It feels possible, not easy, but possible. And that is enough for now. You recognize how rare this feeling is, how often your days are shaped by external demands, how little space there is to ask what you truly need. Tonight has given you that space. You feel a quiet gratitude, not directed at anything specific. Just a gentle appreciation for this moment of alignment. You are not fixing your life. You are not rewriting your story. You are simply allowing yourself to be here, fully, honestly, without urgency. The courage in this choice surprises you. It takes courage to trust stillness, to believe that slowing down will not erase you, to accept that growth does not always look like movement. You begin to see that your worth has never depended on speed, or productivity, or constant improvement. Those were stories you inherited, stories you can now question. The quiet helps you see that you are allowed to choose differently. You don't need to announce this choice. You don't need to justify it. It can remain internal, private, yours. That is part of its power. Quiet courage does not seek recognition. It does not demand applause. It does not rush toward outcomes. It simply exists. You feel it now. Steady, grounded. A sense of inner permission. Permission to move gently through the world. Permission to pause without guilt. Permission to listen to yourself, even when others are loud. This courage does not ask you to retreat from life. It asks you to meet life differently, with openness, with patience, with trust. The night deepens outside. Inside, something settles into place. You are not the same as you were at the beginning of the evening, not dramatically changed, but subtly realigned. You feel more centered, less scattered, more whole. And as you sit with this feeling, you understand that this courage will be tested by noise, by urgency, by comparison. But now you recognize it. You know its shape. You know how it feels in your body. You will be able to return to it, again and again, not by force, but by remembering this quiet moment, this simple truth. That gentleness can be a form of strength, and silence can be a form of courage. The quiet courage stays with you, not as a thought, not as a promise, but as a feeling that settles gently into your body. You don't try to hold on to it. You don't analyze it. You let it be. This moment does not ask for effort. It asks for presence. The night has fully arrived now. The light is lower. The world outside feels distant. Inside, everything feels simpler. You notice how there is less resistance in you, less need to be somewhere else, less urge to become someone different. You are here, and for once, that feels complete. Integration happens quietly, so quietly that you might not realize it at first. It is not a breakthrough. It is not a decision. It is a soft alignment between what you feel and how you are. You begin to sense how this calm could follow you, not as a constant state, but as a reference point, something you can return to. You imagine waking up tomorrow, the ordinary sounds of morning, the familiar rhythm of the day. Nothing dramatic changes. And yet, something is different. You move a little more slowly, not because you are tired, but because you are listening. You speak with a bit more intention. You pause before responding. You notice when your body tightens, and you soften it gently. These are small things, almost invisible, but they shape the way you experience your life. You realize that integration does not require isolation. You don't need to protect this calm from the world. It can exist alongside noise, alongside responsibility, alongside uncertainty. This understanding brings relief. You don't have to escape your life to live gently within it. The quiet courage you discovered is not fragile. It is adaptable. It bends without breaking. It adjusts without disappearing. You think about the times you believed you had to become harder to survive. Stronger, faster, more efficient. Tonight offers another truth. You can remain soft and still endure. You can remain gentle and still move forward. You can remain quiet and still matter. This truth does not shout. It does not demand agreement. It simply exists, and you are free to carry it with you, or not. There is no pressure. You reflect on how often you have rushed past moments like this. Moments where nothing was happening, and everything was happening. Moments of subtle clarity, moments of internal peace. You used to think they were unimportant. Now you see their value. They are where you come back to yourself. Integration is not about holding on to this exact feeling. It is about remembering that it is possible, that you have access to it, even on difficult days. Especially on difficult days. The quiet you experience tonight is not separate from who you are. It is part of you. It always has been. You were just too busy to notice. As the night deepens, your thoughts slow even more. Not because you force them to, but because they no longer need to rush. There is nothing left to solve, nothing left to prove. You feel a gentle sense of closure, not an ending, but a settling, like placing something carefully back where it belongs. You sense gratitude again, not intense, not emotional, just present. Gratitude for this space, for this pause, for the permission to be gentle with yourself. You understand now that gentleness is not a destination. It is a way of moving, a way of meeting each moment, a way of responding instead of reacting. You may forget this tomorrow, or next week, or when life becomes loud again. And that is okay. Integration does not require perfection. It only requires remembering. Remembering that you can slow down, that you can soften, that you can listen inwardly, again and again. The night holds you for a little longer. You allow yourself to rest inside this feeling. No urgency, no expectation, just presence. And as this moment slowly fades into sleep, or into the next part of your evening, you carry with you a quiet knowing that you do not need to become someone else to feel whole, that you do not need to rush to be worthy, that you are allowed to move through life gently. This is not a rule, it is an invitation, one you can accept whenever you are ready, and for now, this is enough.